I'm Ellie Shore, and I am the organizer of the art salons. I've been doing this for 4.5 years now, and I've made it my personal mission to go to museums and galleries and exhibitions throughout South Florida and look for artists who I think have really important stories that they're telling through their art that in some way engages with the world that we live in. And there are many ways in which artists do that, and I'm fascinated by the diversity of artists and the kinds of materials, the kinds of ideas that they bring in. I'm fascinated with the way in which culture is expressed in art. And tonight I'm introducing Dorotha Lemma. Dorotha is someone that I met when we were both standing in front of a painting at the Mortis Collection. And we got it to talking about it, and we just discovered that we loved sharing our ideas, and we were having such a great time, and gradually we've gotten to know each other better. And then over time I began to see her work in local exhibitions and got really excited. And finally, after lots and lots of talk, here she is tonight. Dorotha is an associate professor of art at Wilkes Honor College, which is part of FAU in Jupiter, Florida Atlantic University. She is a painter and a filmmaker and a photographer and has a fascinating life. She's lived all over the United States. She's also lived in Nigeria for some time. She has a Nigerian father, and she's taken all of those experiences and put them into her art. She has a master's degree from Pennsylvania State University, and I think a bachelor's from Tennessee State. And she does wonderful work.
Thank you.
Dorotha
Thank
Lemma.
you. Hi. Thank you, Al. Generally, as a rule, when I show this particular piece, it is actually in color on top of a stack of books or stacks of wood. The title of the work is Mother of Pearl Face, White Mask. And Man Ray, that's who I am doing a general salute to. The other day I heard this on the radio. Vision is a holy discontent. And it summed up for me the way in which I have approached my work as a professional artist for over, I hate to say it, but 30 years. I have found that with my images, I'm beginning to become more and more symbolic. I want to preface this. I am a visual artist, so I use any and every medium in order to speak about those things that concern me. And in this particular case, I have entered the world of digital imagery, and in some cases, digital animation, which I intend to continue to pursue. That does not mean I will stop painting. I will not. I will be incorporating more and more of my painterly approach in the works that I do, but I wanted to start off with this particular image. And the title of this particular image is Meaning and Metaphor. Over the years, I have used branches, trees, birds, bird cages. I have used feathers and scarves or head scarves and wraps to symbolically portray who I am as an African American woman, a Nigerian woman. And the meaning for me, because I remember even in graduate school when I was using branches and sticks and pieces of trees, it is almost my being separated from my own life force. And yet, the particular branch, the tree, or stems that I find intriguing, I photograph them and give them new life. Years ago, in 2005, at the Southern Alleghenies Museum of Art in Pennsylvania, I was given my first solo museum show. And the title of my show was Who Am I? The Journey of the Artist. I thought it was fitting because I was, once again, in that time of transition, trying to understand myself divorced from those historical, literary, political images that I had found and collected at, of course, the literatures through reading different texts, but certain images that I had found on garage hunts and going out to different shops. I would find these little black mammy dolls and all these other things, throughout areas of Pennsylvania. And I became intrigued because, yes, there's a negative connotation associated with these particular images, these particular sculptures, and yet it's part of a story that follows me or has followed me for some time, whether I like the story or not. This particular painting, titled Between Two Beating Hearts, this work actually started a very, very interesting journey for me. And this journey took me to Florence, Italy. It took my work to Bulgaria. It also took it across the country to California at Euphrat Museum of Art, the National Civil Rights Museum. It took me and it took itself many places. Into Beating Hearts, what I was getting at as an artist and as an individual was my heritage from the United States and my heritage from Nigeria. And what I was saying to my Nigerian brethren and sisters is this: I, daughter of Africa, am also part of a courageous people. And through all of our experiences, we survived. You'll see here where I have taken pieces of a quilt that I found at a garage sale. And I believe it is called either my grandmother's or my mother's garden. And what I did, I adhered it to, of course, the surface of the canvas, but I also incorporated text, both written text and actual typed out text that I began to layer paint. I began to layer materials. I began to scratch out some things, hide some things. This text became what I felt was a subtext of my own existence. I'd like to read you a little bit of what I've been working on that may help describe what is here. How does one engage in a discourse concerning the disenfranchised body? Through stereotypical visual and written narratives present in social mythologies and political histories, attempting to define its existence, or through the myopic lens of ethnocultural anomalies of race and gender-based double vision, or possibly the binary riddle of opposites, which is a continued argument engaging the old process, old engagement of us and them and us versus them. It is difficult to say, since to engage in such a discourse, one needs to move beyond an intellectual abstraction of the idea of difference and make visible what art historian Griselda Pollock in Vision and Difference, Femininity, Feminism, and the Histories of Art refers to as the recognition of gender power relations, making visible the mechanics of male power, the social construction of sexual difference, and the role of cultural representations in that construction. Pollock indicates that visual representation is a privileged site in which sight, vision, text, language, mythology, and history are all interwoven in a complex narrative tied to power structures. A shift in such a dynamic where both seeing and looking are understood as a complex physical and mental exercise that communicates multiple levels of gathered information. Hidden. I prefer drawing on paper. I know people are complicating things by saying if it's on a two-dimensional surface and you've drawn on it, it can be a painting. I disagree, but okay. This particular drawing, Hidden, was part of an exhibition called Black Arts. And I had to chuckle because I was invited to participate in the Black Arts exhibition. And I had to chuckle because I found the title itself kind of was a little weighted because, yes, I was thinking about artworks produced by African American people, but I was also thinking about witchcraft and things like that. And I was wondering what the audience who visited the show was thinking as well. Anyway, with this particular drawing, my primary concern was this, you know, the nursery rhyme, ladybug, ladybug, fly away home, your house is on fire and your children are gone. Well, when I started juxtaposing this little rhyme with the idea of, you know, what some of the histories of African American people where, and I'm not just referring to slavery or the conditions in which some of my people historically on my mother's side lived, but I'm also referring to the ones that began to become successful. And I would hear stories of African American communities that were burned or destroyed and people killed because they had become so successful. And that was was a lot worrying. But that's where the text of Hidden and children and escape and freedom. But it also is referring to the way in which a lot of the African American community, I should say more so in the past, because I cannot speak of present times, although I do believe this, would think of the earth, this planet, this is not our home. And so this place, the place in which you live, the place in which you learn, the place in which the spirit is challenged, once you pass on, once you transition, you go to a better place. You head towards freedom. Back in, I think it was 2000, I'll say the early part of 2000, I was invited to Texas A&M Kingsville by a really dear friend and dynamic artist, Santa Barraza. And I had just started beginning to incorporate digital images, and then I would paint on them, draw on them, and I would also couple these particular images with, well, as you can see here, 3 different bowls, and Consume was primarily about the consumption of things that we ourselves as consumers would buy into. The ads, the stories, whether it was about our skin, our hair, our eye color, our physical size. These are the things that we were bombarded with. You would go to the grocery store and you'd see all these amazing magazines of all these beautiful and stunning people, and then later on, much later, was disclosed that airbrush was the friend of these models and other individuals. One of my former advisees said to me, she said, Dory, please remember that Cheryl Tiegs can't even live up to the image of Cheryl Tiegs. And it stuck with me. When she said, it stuck with me, and I was like, yeah, you're right. So these things that were beginning to identify us, or that we were holding a mirror up to in order to define us, I started picking at it. I started saying, no, this is not who I am. And this is not who other people are. People need to self-reflect. So I wrote this. The Black body rests at the core of my artistic investigation. And it's through its historical narrative that the ideas concerning its subject-object origins, that such ideas are questioned. The potency of the image that houses the social taboos of history and reproduced by visual culture and voyeuristic tourism is a great determiner of the construction of identity. The social construction of the acceptable body, what Jean-Paul Sartre refers to as being for others, is in constant conflict with one's perception of self or being for self. Juxtaposing fragments of my body with objects and texts provides a transformative power that helps to question assumed knowledge regarding identity. The mixed media assembled artwork consumed through it, the viewers introduced to 3 closely cropped images of a woman, being myself. I'm my best model, by the way. The mouth is partially open, caught in the act of consuming. A silver spoon, and yes, that was deliberate. The transporter of the product is tilted upward, resting lightly upon her lower lip. Something unseen is being ingested. The only clue that the viewer is permitted lies within the wooden bowl, filled with letters, words, text, painted in such a manner that simulate fool's gold. You know the alphabet cereal? Oh, that's really great. And so is curry and gold powder. Mix that all together and put it in there. Of this arrangement, art historian Bridget Cook, she wrote an article about my work titled Dory Lema, One Part of a Whole. She suggests Lema critiques the overload of media text and image that overwhelm American visual culture. The artist presents a visual counterpart to the adage, all that glitters is not gold. The mixed media composition offers a warning to viewers to be aware of what they consume. And that's the detail. Yeah, I love that lipstick, isn't that great? Betwixt and between. Oh my. Actually, that was the title of the solo show at Texas A&M, Kingsville. With betwixt and between, I was referring to the slippery slope of identity as one squeezes, slips, presses in and out of the social cultural box, the in-between place of Sartre's being and nothingness. If you haven't read Sartre, please do. He's heavy, but it's great. Betwixt and between represents the artist's continual struggle with the language of labels inscribed upon the flesh that holds the body under watchful eyes of surveillance. Betwixt and between is a dwelling place where the subject, I, and the object, I, are one and the same, yet separate. Conflict erupts only when a tension arises between who I am and who I am perceived to be clashes. This, of course, is common since the lens in which I view myself rarely ever reconciles with how others see me. The personal investigation, analysis of the body in and outside of history, sexism and racism, related viewing, are ways in which the art that I create question the image's reality, one's relationship to self, as well as my own. I Owe You, that has seen its travel as well. It's very interesting with this particular painting, which the top pieces are my neck area and my mouth area, and deliberately just getting towards the edge of the nose. But it was a painting of a chair that I had that I found at a garage sale, and I was so upset that I had to let it stay in Pennsylvania when I was moving. There was no more space in the van for me to take it, but I still have the handmade broom. Stacked upon the chair itself are plates and a white teacup, and you'll find that teacup theme I go back to in 2016. This particular painting was created between 2000, and I'll say 2002 and 2005, because my work has a tendency to evolve. Some paintings, like Between Two Beating Hearts, I knew exactly what I wanted to do. I remember I walked into the studio and I worked until I finished. It was done. And that was just one day. And I knew at that time. But works like this, when I'm struggling to find out what actually I am trying to say, and if that meaning is getting across, they sometimes take me years. Because what I do is I work on them and then I turn them to the wall. And I work on multiple works at the same time. And I try to make sure that I listen to the exact same music I'm listening to, because I don't want my mood to change and change the work. Here, and I still have, and I was going to bring her, and I forgot her. She's actually in my office. You see that's the little coin, Mammy with her little yellow purse, and she's facing forward. I deliberately placed these little sculpture images on my throat right here because I'm thinking about voice. My voice giving her voice, even in silence, even as the work itself is silent, it still, to some, may resonate. I don't want to say speak, because I had a real interesting conversation with my students about the work not speaking is what you're interpreting. And the first image, she's turned towards the viewer. In the third image, she's turned away. And she's latched, she's attached to the you. And that you is me. And that me is her. But there's also another meaning here. And that meaning goes to, or one can think about the history of yes, slavery, but also servitude, not just to white families, a particular service to one's own family, and what is left for you as an individual. Michel Foucault's phrase, a multiplicity of discourses, further underlines the many and alternate readings that simultaneously occur within others and ourselves, even when we are looking at the same image. This has more to do with one's frame of reference or vantage point perspective. Education and/or lived experiences also enter into this realm. In other words, we comprehend what authors Donaldson, Goldwyn, Jones refer to as texts written from various positions or stratifications. These texts incorporate our personal, social, cultural, political, economic, and biological histories. As viewers, observers, involved in the act of seeing, we come to realize that seeing is never, ever neutral. The link connecting the eye to the mind is memory. This memory holds for the individual ways in which to understand one's life. We continually make meaning of our lives through the memory of our personal experiences. These experiences contain not only our actual lived occurrences, but also others' memories that are not our own. Both our personal experiences and inherited experiences float on the tips of our synapses, hovering above until a connection is made. In 2014, 2015, I began to, through this really cool app, by the way, use images of myself, and I would put them in these spaces, and then I would complicate what it is that I was thinking about and considering. I was thinking about the complexity of our life and our complexity of how we understand ourselves and others. I was thinking about the complexity of relationships. And those relationships are not, and please understand, they are not solely black and white what I'm talking about. I'm talking about human relationships and how complex they happen to be. I just happen to be using, in this particular case, myself, again, best model, most handy, and the objects that I have collected over the years. I have a fondness for this particular piece where in this thought bubble, I'm thinking I am, I am, I am. And yet it is the object that states I am, I am, I am. Further complicating it by the text, it says, while child, don't you see? The text between is the narrative. This is where meaning rests. This is where language is disrupted and it bursts. And so we have to struggle with ourselves and with each other, be it in families, be it in schools, be it in the community, struggle to understand the intra, sub, and this is just me being cute, contextual, context you all. You'll see that I go back and forth, using collage images, paintings, drawings, using photographs. A majority of the photographs I've taken or asked my sister or somebody, can I borrow that? And then alter it. With Southern Wind, my birds began to enter my narrative a little bit more strongly. I mean, I've always used birds, always. Birds in cages, birds in freedom in the work that I do. But what I found actually, and I can't remember where I found it, I found a parasol. I found a sun parasol. And I said, well, what happens when a sun parasol is turned on its head? It's not functioning in the way in which it was supposed to be created. So these birds, voice, spirit, soul carriers, they made it into a boat. And the wind is taking them, blowing them in a new direction. The South is complicated. It's complicated. My parents, my mother's from Knoxville, my father is from Nigeria. He was Igbo. Wasn't in the sense that he's transitioned into the next life. And they met at the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor. They were both going to school. He was studying to be a surgeon, and she was studying to be a pedodontist. And he fell in love before she did. He chased her for a year. And when she finally was kind enough to say yes, she had to convert to Catholicism because he was Catholic and my mother was Southern Baptist. And I asked her about that before she passed away. I said, Mom, you know, that's a big leap. She goes, oh, honey, it wasn't for me. I like the high mass. And I loved your father. I said, okay. But anyway, so he was doing his residency, one of his residencies in Massachusetts before he was taking us to Nigeria. It was almost 3 years into our time in Nigeria that the Biafran Civil War, and those of you who may recall it, erupted, and we were there. And my grandmother, Lucille Hill, that woman was savvy, fiery and savvy. She politely went and saw her representative, her senator and congressman. My babies are over there, they need to come back home. And so they worked it out for us to come back home. And my mother, who had already had completed 2 or 3 other degrees, because she had also studied at Howard University as well as in Michigan, wanted to go back to the University of Michigan and complete another degree while my father remained in Nigeria. He was going to come back, but unfortunately became very ill and passed away. I say all of this, not just to give you some background about my story, but to let you know we lived Massachusetts, Nigeria, Michigan, Knoxville, Tennessee, back up to Michigan, back to Nashville, where we were there for a long time. My siblings are still there now. And then I went up to Pennsylvania and was crazy enough to stay there for almost 19 years. Now, I love my alma mater, Penn State, I love it. But it's cold. It's cold. So I had to find somewhere warm. And I loved what they were doing at the Honors College of FAU. Spectacular. The marriage between arts, humanities, and sciences. So they won me over, and I came. And I've been here since 2005. But during all that travel and traveling abroad to China, to Mexico, to Ireland, to Bulgaria, to Italy, and on, it broadened my understanding of my culture, my identity, and actually my love for this country. But I also knew that there existed this difference in thought between the North and the South, whether it is a continued residue of why part of me is here in the first place, or just distance. Okay, and the internet's just kind of narrowing that, so we'll see. Anyway, I started working on these pieces that are, the interiors are 4 by 4 inches and the exteriors are 12 by 12. And I love them because for me, it was more immediate and quick. And I didn't have to overthink because I have a tendency to do that. And this particular piece is called Witness. And it was actually on exhibition at the Robeson Gallery at Penn State University in mid-2000. And actually this particular piece itself garnered a lot of attention, maybe because of what I was referring to here again with the sun umbrella, but this time there's water in it. So how is it in this particular field serving its purpose? And what actually this particular bird that is outside, but yet part of its tail is within the cage, what is it bearing witness to? And that is my hand holding up this particular cage. This one is actually entitled, and here goes that sun umbrella again, blowing as these birds begin to peck at pomegranates. And for those of you who do not know it, the pomegranate itself has been also in Catholicism associated with the Virgin Mary, but it's also been associated with ability to reproduce, fertility. So I started playing with a lot of things that had some interesting meaning. This work, I dreamt of birds and other things. Here, I drew myself behind these flock of birds. And then here, I'm carrying a bowl and I've stitched into this central part, and then the thread winds itself around and winds itself around another bird that is moving forward. If you see this actual piece, actually this was on display at Palm Beach State College. I can't remember the year, sorry. But there is a piece that it looks like it's very thin. It becomes a window. The division becomes a window. And you can't see it as much there. Yes?
You see up on the left hand,
Uh-huh.
and it seems like it's not supposed to be there.
You're so insightful. Well, without making up your mind for you, I will just say that that particular bird itself is where these are here to the surface, that one is not. It has been painted, it has been stuffed, it protrudes. Birds are voice for me. They are soul, they're ba, they're ka, they're soul, they're spirit. They are freedom. They're many things to me. What they are to others, I don't know. Some people have positive reactions to it, and some people don't. The one thing I will say about My work, it rarely has had a kind of neutral kind of effect. I've had people actually, and I don't have an image of that particular painting, that have actually physically been shaken and very angry. I didn't know why, but yeah, I've had work that elicits that type of response, which I find fascinating, and I'm willing to talk to people about it. But I know people react differently to what I do. It came in waves. Actually, this particular painting was very, very personal for me on an interesting level. At that particular time, myself, I was going to have surgery for tumors sorry to be, I know it's TMI, but anyway, with this, I also realized that my desire to one day bring a child in the world was over. And the umbrellas were drifting, I will say, away. And no matter what it is that I was consuming, it wasn't going to change anything. Now, for other people, it meant other things, and that's fine. And I'm fine with that. More people spoke about what they considered its inner beauty, etc. There it is featured at the Florida Women's Museum of Art, and it has also been on display at the Robeson Gallery, and I think it was also for a time at Scripps Institute. Yes, ma'am.
In that picture, is she consuming the pomegranate?
Yes, she is. Yes, she is. And I will say this too, there's a little bit of thickness of paint. The work up front is not flat. The folds of the drapery, etc., they're not flat.
Was there a purpose for drawing in 3 canvases?
With triptychs, I love diptychs and triptychs. It's really very interesting that a whole canvas for me, it's nice, but parts of the whole carry another meaning for me, because you're taking these pieces collectively and then putting them together. Some may be able to, you can show separately, but not always. Yes.
My question, you have 3 parasols there, not talking the triptych. But
Actually, there's 4.
well, all right, 3.5.
3 far away. The
Yeah.
fourth one is far away.
And
Yes.
in consume, I was going to ask you, to disturb you, you had 3 parts. All right. Is there a meaning in 3?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, there's definitely meaning. And that meaning for me is more spiritual and definitely connects me to my upbringing. And actually, the part of my upbringing, I would say I was Catholic, but when we lived with my grandmother, we were Catholic and Baptist. So we did both when we lived with my grandparents. And when we had babysitters, we were Church of Christ. So, yeah, tell that to a child. I know why. Definite reference to Maya Angelou's book. This has been shown without this center piece, and on one occasion with. Honestly, it depends on how I'm feeling. In this particular case, the painted bird rests on a pillar, and this other one, of course, rests on top of my bird cage. Within I Know Why, this area, you can see it's cream colored and white, but the interior part of the cage itself is the landscape. This is where the landscape is housed. And again, you have my hand with the cage, and it's held outward. And this pattern is a deliberate line of movement, whether it's of the bird or whatever is moving through this particular space. That's what that is. Yes, I do. In this particular case, and my mouth is open.
Right, yeah.
Actually, it's more song. And you'll see, oh, I hope I put that in there, in the painting, if I put it in, the call, because I began to understand the importance of voice and what voice, sound, text, all these other things were beginning to call me to do.
Why is the hand holding the cage? You have that in other works too. I don't mean
Well,
right, I mean
no. I know. To tie it to a tree or to let it float or let it to be the cage itself to be held by something that is inanimate, I don't know, it just didn't feel right for me. This cage itself was an extension of me. And at least in this particular case, the cage at the base is open. You know, the bars are there, but I guess one would think of a bird or insect, in this case, maybe a lizard, where the door is open here and you're hitting up against the glass. And you go, nope, here you go. There's freedom there. But yes, I feel there's a connection there with holding it. And in holding it, I get to the idea or an understanding of choice. The Two Graces. This work was shown at the Arlington Museum of Art. It was in a group show with the Women's Caucus for Art and the Robeson Cultural Center, as well for some time at Scripps Institute, Florida, I think for several years actually, before our work was returned. This next slide, which is called The Interpreter, I took those birds out, and I get into the idea of speech, talk, conversation, and something else, because something very interesting started happening where I would attempt to explain certain complex ideas, and for some reason people couldn't understand me. And I had a friend that would say the exact same thing. She was standing by me and be, oh, I understand. And I was like, oh God, okay. So this was a result of that incident. This I Am a Bird series actually began when I first came to the Honors College in 2005. I started attempting to kind of like I don't want to say transform myself, but put on certain accoutrements that I was associating with birds. From the headdress itself, and then putting the headdress in, and then coming back in, and then doing this scribble as I was erasing and carving out, not carving out, smoothing out, pulling out my form. I took this wooden shape that I had and birds on the other side, placed it in the cage and juxtaposed it with my bird image. And I'm going to continue to be doing that as I continue to explore voice, my own spirituality, and my own ways of communicating with the world. Now, something interesting happened. I had a conversation with myself, and I said, you know, you're really a great model, everything else, but there are other people in the world, not only you. So I asked this model, would she be willing for me to photograph her? And she said yes. And took well over 100 images that first photo shoot. And as I was looking at this particular piece, I went, Eureka, this is it. This is what I'm moving towards, I'm striving for. The title of this particular image is called The Gateway. And with the gateway itself, yes, it is a still photograph, but also it is an animated piece. So I'm beginning to combine my interest in still images and animation. Special shout out and thank you to Jen Fortnash of Fortnash Studios. Actually, Jennifer was one of my former students, and I hired her for the year, and I took my images and directed her in different photo shoots and put this particular piece together. This is a different version than I had shown at the Cultural Arts Center. I wasn't as satisfied with the one there. I mean, I love it, but I wasn't as satisfied. This particular piece, let me see if I can show it again if it's possible. This form actually is what I wanted to say about energy and the formation and the power of creation, light and movement. Actually, this is material, and it was taken and then placed into this cage. The other work, Soliloquy, Wailing Wall, this eventually will also, parts of it will also become an animation. I juxtaposed the photograph itself, which can actually be larger, with the bird cage. And in the bird cage, and this is my dear friend, Dr. Amy McLaughlin, she's a philosopher. I told her, I said, glance under the bird cage. And she did, and there was a mirror. So only little kids could see it. And they go, hey! The idea of the mirror, which I use a lot, is for one to become, even for a brief moment, implicated in a part of the work itself. The cage door is, of course, open, and there, in this case, no birds at all. Wailing Wall, because it's going to become one. Eventually, there will be sound. And there would have been sound with this particular piece, but I'm an artist, I'm procrastinating. What can you say? White Rose. And to give you a sense of the dimensions there, it is next to the photograph I titled Horizon Line. And I encourage you to look up the definition of horizon line, and you'll get a sense of what I was getting at with this particular image. This work is titled Look.
So different in the black and white versus when you had the color earlier.
It is intentional because, as I have said to my students, that color changes everything. With color, there's certain associations that one sometimes can't escape, and it's so subliminal that you're taken aback when you realize what you personally are associating with a particular color. When I was thinking of look, I was thinking of what a writer, Valerie Export, claims about the body. She says the body of a woman is a site where culture manufactures the blockade of women. And if so, then the sites of culture peculiar to the black body is a barrier constructed by silence. So what is a woman, says Conroy Media and Stanbury. They have said that we are really asking questions about ideology, about how discourse has contoured the category of women. Therefore, it is with difficulty for a simple explanation to be provided, given the social-cultural indoctrination of the individual responding to the question and how they are influenced by the responses given. There's an art educator named Dan, the Danner. In his article, Concepts of the Body, he writes The body so everyday, so common, so personal, so biological. Or is it? He began to amass the subtle tension amongst knowledge, perception, and sight that underline the complexity inherent of labeling the body. For example, our inability to decode the physical body beyond our socially constructed beliefs is one subtle factor, while a more obvious indicator emerges from our inability to see the body beyond gender, race, or other visually identifiable physical descriptors. The Danner understands how the body as we know it keeps changing through the ways in which we know it. In this case, or not necessarily so in this case, but stereotypes, the printed image, and media play a strong role in our understanding of how we come to know others as well as ourselves. With look, the one thing I noticed when I saw this particular portrayal, because when you're in the moment and you're capturing images, you don't always step back and really see what it is that you're done, or at least you're doing, at least I don't. It takes me a moment to reflect. I think I said that before with my paintings, even more so with the photographs. And that look, that moment, I thought it was arresting. And I said, that's it. This is the area that I'm wanting to move into. This is titled Dancing with Light. And here she's playing with fabric. This is something that's going to be also part of a direction that I'm moving into, because I love the idea of light and movement. This still remains untitled, but when I saw this particular piece, I thought of a religious ecstasy. And as she was entangled, or as the silk transparent cloth was falling, the one thing I noticed is the only thing that I could see was actually the scarf and her arms and then her eye.
Where's the rest of the body? I'm sorry.
Where's the rest of the body?
We did disappear.
Yeah, it did. I'm not. This is the direction also that I'm moving through when I'm beginning to now do more painting back into the photographs and even writing in, and then adding objects that have meaning and making sure, and it was deliberately so, that the positioning of this particular silver platter was right underneath the photograph so that her physical image could be pulled down into this teacup.
I thought it was smoke coming out of the coffee, and I saw facial. Yeah, that's the reflection.
Yes, and that's really interesting. I didn't think it, but also notice there's a hole there. Make of it what you will. Another work, and I've been again going back to these head dresses, these scarves, this layering of veils, and focusing more on the subject's form and just parts. In this case, still talking about certain fragments that are seen and then hiding these other areas. This entitled piece, which is more of an unveiling here. And actually there's a cage, and within the cage there's a bird that actually rests on top. But it's a flattened image, so, well, not the flowers, but the other image. Yeah. This is Wade in the Water. It goes back to the Negro spiritual song, Wade in the Water, but I'm not going to sing it for you, so don't get scared. Bringing back the branch, the tree. Also, you see here the boat and actually her wading or appearing to wade in the water. And in case you're wondering, definitely there is a mirror, but this time it's turned upward within this cage. Going back to what I was talking about before, and these are juxtapositionings of my image and other images of movement. It says here, do I remember my thoughts as I shape them, as I move through time and space? They remain a mystery. They remain a blur. Here, I say, I exist in the half-light of meaning. I float, and I cannot read everything else that I have written. My apologies for that. Erase, 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 and disappear. I remember when I sent this particular image to the director of the galleries at the Robeson Gallery at Penn State, Ann Shields, and we have a long friendship, almost 20 some odd years. And when she saw that, she goes, "What do you mean? Where are you going? What do you mean you're disappearing?" And I said, "Well, it goes back to identity. And if I'm in the half-light of meaning, the place in which I think we all exist, then it leaves me the opportunity to transition and become something new." She goes, "Okay, well, I'll accept that." Here I partake of buried visions. Now, I do not have the MP4 animation of this, but we worked on this one over the summer. And this area here is the one that moves. This water moves, and from here to here, there's a paintbrush. With my hand, it dips into the water and then adds color to each area. And at the end, some birds carried away. Anyway, I also not only use my own physical self, I make use of my paintings and my other photographs. And close to the last, or I think it's near the last. So what, dear reader, do I create? And here is the animation of this piece. I encourage you to look up the symbolism of monarchs, butterflies, and ladybugs or ladybirds for yourself, and you'll know or get a sense of what this is about. And I wanted to show you the image in color.
Like your red lipstick.
Well, thank you. I think I dig it. So this is me, and this is me saying thank you. Goodbye. All right.